Good evening. Thank you for being here. I call this meeting of the Magnolia Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. So if everybody would please stand, Mr. David McCarty is going to lead us in our invocation and pledges.
Hello. If you could all please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we ask for your strength and guidance as we are here to help benefit children of this district. We ask for your protection and strength, and we also ask for you to be with us and all of our families and our extended families who have recently been touched by these tragedies and natural disasters. We also ask that you please watch over us as we leave here tonight, and dear Father, in your name we pray. Amen. Please join me in the United States pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I think you're the first rattle out of the box tonight.
Oh, well, look at that. I sure am. Okay, so it is October, so that is National Principals Month. You may notice that our crowd is a little sparse this evening, so as is our tradition here, we have given our principals a pass on being here today. I talked to a couple of them. Rest assured, they're very appreciative and glad to get a pass. I'm sure people will let them know the things they need to be aware of from the meeting. But so if you see one of our principals or our assistant principals, be sure and tell them thank you for the hard work that they do for our kids in our district. So there you go, National Principals Month.
We sure appreciate it, everything they do. They do so much for us, but I have to rub it in and ask him when the board gets a pass and doesn't have to show up. So,
well, probably the same time the directors get a pass because they're all in the audience right now too. So,
thank you, sir. All right, Dr. Campbell, I think you're on deck next.
Thank you, President Blizzard and Dr. Bullock and board members. If you don't mind, I'm going to turn this around so I can see some people that I'm talking to. I'm the CTE director. My name is Foy Campbell, and I have a great job. The toughest job I've had in 5 years is sitting next to Cody and Bella while we were waiting on this evening to begin. There's so many areas that I supervise. Today I had a chance to take a group of health science students down to the Health Science Museum, and I learned how to suture, so if you have an injury, I can help you out. And then we also, tonight, your floral arrangements are brought to you by Miss Brittany Thomas, Advanced Floral Design class, and the goodies you have in front of you, board members and Dr. Stevens, are from the culinary arts teacher and Miss Brooke Gentry at Magnolia High School. So we get to practice making them and making the arrangements, and then we also get to hand those off to you. And also on this Thursday, half of the Magnolia Junior High students will be coming over to Magnolia West to take a look at CTE classes and maybe consider some pathways that they might consider joining. We recently had an ag show, and we wanted to, there were some improvements that were voted on the last bond that were coming our way. And Mr. Bruner has so many things, and we just said, we really want this done. We really want this done for the Ag Show because it's in September. And so he worked really hard to get that done. So thank you for that. And he also is working with us on a health science building at Magnolia High School and also a HVAC building at Magnolia West High School. And after the Ag Show, we noticed some things that we could still improve upon. So we met with him, and there's still some things that we'll be doing at the Ag Barn. I'm throwing glasses, sorry. And this last week, I was cleaning my house, as you should on fall break, And I ran across this picture. Mr. Bruner and I have had an association for many years. That was in 2005 when he was giving me a tour of Ellisor Elementary. We both think we look the same, but you might have a different opinion. So anyway, that's been a while. So tonight, we did have an ag show, our 40th annual ag show, and at that ag show, the sales announced right at the end of the auction were $422,700, and that's before post-sale. So if you don't make the sale, you sell your animal at post-sale, and that brings in money. And then also, grandma who can't afford $30,000 might add, $100 or something like that. And those are called add-ons. So after that, we think we'll be approaching $500,000. We'll have a total for you later, but one of the best, I think the best show on record. And a large part of that has to do with the support we have here in this community, and so we want to thank you. I want to thank the school board members that made it out. We saw you, and thank you for coming out and supporting us. Dr. Bullock, I saw you there. I saw most of this table here. I didn't see Sam Bell there, but Joe Devies tells me that Sam Bell was on his way, and then he realized the swine we were auctioning had not been turned into bacon yet, so he thought he'd hold off. So we'll call you when it's ready. And I also want to thank my fellow directors for showing up and saying hi and supporting us. So thank you for that. We also had a chance to celebrate the passing of a great community leader, and that's Mr. Tony Gullo. And so we invited his widow and his kiddos to come join us. And I think we have a picture right here. Billy Masson holding a sign that we gave the family, and Mazu is, Miss Gullo is sitting there in a wheelchair, and all the family around her. So they felt very honored. And then the picture that he has, and you can see it also in the background, will hang in our ring as long as we have a Magnolia ISD Ag Show, thanking him for his community support. And the cool thing is the Gullo family gave Billy Maston the rights to spend their money. So we still have the Gullo money. Yay! So. All right, at this time, I'd like to invite our ag teachers up here that are here, if you will. Come on up. I didn't tell you you were coming up, but you will also be speaking in a minute. Just kidding. So those, and you know what? I have worked in my 30 years with some great people, but I'm telling you, I try not to exaggerate, but I have not worked with a group that works harder than our ag teachers. Let's give them a big round of applause. And while we were on fall break, they were up at the Texas State Fair and different contests and things like Jim had 5 contests during the break. And so they're working all the time. Dr. Bullock, you and I had a conversation one time about that guy with the Head and Shoulders commercial, never not working. That's the ag teachers. They're never not working. Always on call, always on call. So this right here is Jim Ward from Magnolia Junior High. And Laura Waddle from Magnolia Junior High. Tiffany Waits from Magnolia High School. Solomon Butler from Magnolia High School. And our chairperson of our committee is Dusty Hutchinson from Magnolia West. So it's a local show that we run, and we have a committee. And Ms. Grimm, come on up here. Ms. Grimm is one of the parents on the committee. We have ag teachers, and we have also parents that are on the committee. This is Chrissy Grimm. She serves with Magnolia West, and each booster club nominates 3 parents to come join us on the committee. And we could not have done the ag show without this group of people, all of your help that I'm looking at, and also the parents on the committee did a fantastic job. So without further ado, what we wanted to do is invite the kids to show off what they had. And then at the end, I think we're going to do it, Ms. Myers, I think we're going to do a picture on that far wall rather than there because of the size of the group. Okay? And then parents, if you want to take a picture with that during the break, that's a good opportunity, good photo opportunity. Okay? So we're going to start with our, as I call your name, come on, stand up here. We're going to start with our grand champion steer. This is Quincy Walker. She's from Magnolia West FFA. Her steer sold for $27,500 and was bought by the Gullo dealership. So let's give her a big round of applause. Good job. And then Cash Wooten, I don't think he's here. He's like 6'12". I don't see him, but his reserve champion sold for $30,000, and Third Degree Specialty Tools bought that. Next is a young lady named Mila Wagner, and I have lots of introductions for her. The first one is going to be, she had a grand champion swine that she took to auction at $14,000, bought by M&M Coastal. Then let's see what else she did. She did everything except the baking contest. She was the reserve broiler, and since she sold the swine, she did not sell the broiler at auction. And then I also have you down for the heifer, reserve champion in heifer. And then she was second in our very first ever floral arranging contest that we had on Wednesday night. So she took second place. Did I forget anything? And she's Bella's best friend. She wanted me to tell her, you guys. And so give Mila Wagner a big round of applause. And before I forget, Quincy's mom is here, Miss Walker, right there with the video camera. And Miss Blackwell is, where are you? Right there. That's Mila's mom. Okay. Next we have Hannah Pitcock. She's the reserve champion in the swine category, and she sold it for $9,000 to M&M Coastal. And Miss Pitcock, her mom, is here. Where are you? Right there. And if you've never seen a lady that knows how to work, that lady helped out a lot at the show. So give her, Hannah, a big round of applause. Next we have Kylie Gregory, and come on up. She was the grand champion goat, but because her steer was on sale, she couldn't sell the goat, so it did not go to auction. But her third place steer went for $27,000 by Charlie Riley. And every class has to have a tardy guest, and that's Miss Caitlin Cooper coming in from Magnolia High School. And then the reserve champion goat is Lacey Chilson, and she's here with mom and dad, Mr. and Mrs. Chilson, and it sold for $6,500 to American Drilling and Sawing, Inc. Give her a round of applause. Next we have Cody Vinghouse, and she was the grand champion in the lamb category. She's from Magnolia Intermediate School, and she's here tonight with Dad, Mr. Vinghouse, Dr. Vinghouse, Mom, Brother Coy, and Meemaw, and Granddad. And her lamb went for $10,000 to Barry Shepard. Give her a big round of applause. Next, reserve champion lamb is Bella Matthews. She's a fourth grader at Lyon Elementary. She has her parents here, Nikki and Lee Matthews, and also her fourth grade teacher, who happens to be the mom of a other student, but you get credit for both. Thank you for being here. And her lamb sold for $6,000 to Texas Sapphire. So give Bella a big round of applause. Next, we have turkey category. Grand champion is Braden Matheson. Come on up. Braden is joined by Kevin and Lindsay Matheson, and his turkey sold for $8,500 by McCarty Development Company, LLC. Might be here somewhere. There you go. So make sure during the break, Braden, you get a picture with the dude that bought your turkey. Okay. And next is the reserve champion, Leah Padilla. And Mr. and Mrs. Padilla, her parents are joining us tonight. Leah's turkey sold for $8,000 to Commissioner Charlie Riley. Give her a round of applause. Next, we have the broiler category, and those things are hard to hold. It's pretty interesting to watch. The grand champion is Serenity McLemore. Come on up. And her broiler sold for $5,500 to American Drilling and Sawing, Inc. Congratulations to you. So you don't think I forgot a category. Reserve champion was Mila again. And then the rabbit is Luke Carr. Come on up. The grand champion. Rabbit Luke Carr. He's joined by his mom and dad, Mr. and Mrs. Carr. And his rabbit sold for $5,500 to Casey's Pub and Grill. The day of the show, I asked him what what was the secret to being the grand champion rabbit person? And he said, get in a fight with your mom before the show. So there you go. Who knew? And then our reserve champion for rabbits is Miss Jessica Taylor. Come on up. She's joined tonight by her mom, Mrs. Taylor. You're over there. And she's a former member of our committee as well as a parent. So thank you for that. And her rabbit sold for $5,500 to Ben Herman. Congratulations. And that's Kylie Gregory's phone that went off. She should know better. The grand champion heifer this year was, the category was, the winner was Summer Grimm. Come on up. And for those of you that don't know, I didn't know before I got this position, but the heifers are not market animals, okay? So we don't sell those. And so this one was a show category. And then the reserve champion was Mila Wagner with all the other 18,000 things she won. So I wanted to tell you a really quick story that they're in show dress, okay? Most of them are in show dress. So it's the black pants and brown or black boots, brown or black belt, and then a collared shirt. Did I get it right? Okay, so that's show dress. And even if you just drop off baked goods, right, Mr. Berna? Your daughter's in show dress when she drops off baked goods. Okay, so one of the funniest things I've seen is this guy who's 6'7". How tall is he? Is it Lane? Is that his name? Like he's 6'7" or something like that. He came in and he's turning in his baked goods, and Miss Waddle and I and Miss Boudreaux are the ones collecting them, and he's not in show dress. He's got 3 minutes to turn it in. And we said, you're not in show dress. And then Summer Graham, wave at us over there. She is type A personality. She goes up to this guy named Cy Tolbert and said, I need your britches. And so she sends him into the restroom, takes off his britches, and the guy she asked is about as tall as she is. And then he puts on, the 6'7" dude puts on the britches and turns them in high water all the way up to here. But he's in show dress, we accept it, and there's the story. So, did we get a picture of it? That's a missed opportunity. Okay, so, but if you were there, you will never forget it. So, awesome. One of the reasons I asked the ag teachers to be here is to show off the people I get to work with every day. But also, I also wanted them to have the chance to come and say thank you to you for what you do to support our ag program. And thank you, Mr. Bruner, and then voters, people that voted in the bond to support our ag program. So we're extremely proud. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's give our students one more big round of applause. Okay, so we're going to go. Students head that way, teachers head that way, and then parents, in a minute, they're going to call for a little break. We get a recess in this thing. And so during that time, it's a good time for pictures. And then also, if you want to escape, that's a good time as well, okay? So we're going to take a picture, and then we'll see you guys at the break. Thank you, Dr. Bullock. Thank you, President Bozier.
All right, that's a fine job. Let's give these guys another round. That's awesome. So while they're over there taking pictures, I want to let you know that you're invited to stay for the business section of the meeting. However, if you want to slip out, for whatever reason, we're going to take a short 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So Ms. Hinkleman, I have one form. Do we have anybody else signed up to speak? Just the one? Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Kimberly Claridge. And actually, while you're coming up here, please, I'm going to read something that kind of the game rules of this. So participants must have turned in a request form 15 minutes prior to the start of the meeting. Participation is limited to 3 minutes. A timer is provided on the screen located in front of you. Once your time is up, we ask that you please return to your seat. Any complaint or charge brought against an employee by name opposition for which resolution has not been sought in accordance with policy should be pursued through the district's grievance policy. Please note that the Board of Trustees shall not deliberate, respond, or make decisions regarding any subject that is not included on the agenda that is posted. So with that, please.
I am a parent of 2 students in the district, 2 daughters, one at Bear Branch Junior High, one at Magnolia High School. I have a statement here that I wrote because I didn't want to go too long and I don't want to ramble. So, good evening, board members, administrators, fellow parents, students, teachers, and everybody else who may have joined tonight. I stand before you to address an issue that affects many students, particularly young girls in our schools, the constant and unfair application of dress codes, specifically when it comes to leggings. Leggings have become a standard, comfortable, and widely accepted piece of clothing for all people, genders, and ages, yet in many schools, leggings are treated as somehow inappropriate, less than acceptable than traditional pants. With girls being singled out and held to different standards, this distinction does not only perpetuate outdated notions of modesty, but also creates a culture of inequality where girls are unfairly targeted and their bodies are overly scrutinized. Let's start by asking, why should leggings be treated differently from other forms of pants? Leggings are made of similar materials to other forms of athletic wear. They're comfortable, flexible, and suitable for various activities. In fact, many schools are pushing for students to become active, engaged, and involved in physical activity. Leggings provide practical, functional option for such environment. There is no logical reason why leggings should be singled out as inappropriate while other pants, such as sweatpants, jeans, khakis, are allowed without restriction. More importantly, when we impose different standards on girls, we send a message that their clothing choices are inherently problematic and need to be policed more than boys. This sets up a harmful narrative where girls are taught to be self-conscious about their bodies, their clothing choices, their worth, and while boys are largely free from the same restrictions. Why is it that girls' bodies are scrutinized when the dress code is being forced? Why is it assumed that girls' clothing can be disruptive or distracting when in fact it shouldn't matter how students engage in their education and not in their attire? This is not just a question of fashion or personal choice. This is a question of fairness, equality, and respect. When dress codes are enforced in this way that only targets girls or are targets more harshly, we create an environment of unnecessarily shame and distraction. We teach girls that their bodies are something to be hidden and controlled while boys are free to wear whatever they want without being judged for their clothing. Instead, we should work towards a dress code that is fair and consistent for all students regardless of gender. And when it doesn't make certain students feel like their clothing choices are being policed more than others. A dress code should prioritize comfort, safety, and focus on educational experience rather than promoting outdated gender stereotypes. Let's allow all students, whether they wear leggings, jeans, or other acceptable attire, to be comfortable and supported in their learning environment. In conclusion, I urge the board to consider a dress code that treats leggings the same as other pants and eliminates any gender-based double standards. We all deserve the opportunity to learn without the fear of being judged for what we wear and the time to create a more inclusive, equitable, and supportive school environment for everyone. Thank you. I would like to ask you to please consider putting this on the agenda as a topic. There are many parents interested in discussing this further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time. Okay, Mr. Bruner, there he is.
Good evening. I'm going to bring you up to date on where we're at with construction on the bond. There we go. And before I get started, I think we should put a restriction on any type of photographs introduced at board meetings that are older than, say, 5 years.
I was waiting for that. I figured that was coming at some point tonight.
Anyway, so let's get started with Magnolia Parkway Intermediate, newly named Magnolia Parkway Intermediate. This building is set to open in August of next year, but it's likely to be turned over probably sometime in November. And so we're working, we're set up for January furniture deliveries. And it's funny, I was just talking with Ms. Ohlendorf about training, so we're going to have to try to stage the training for staff on that facility next summer. But again, I don't think that'll be too much of a problem. We do, hope that we can occupy this building somewhat in the second semester, so it will definitely be ready. So here's a shot of the security vestibule, and I want to back up a little bit. I don't know what happened, but we missed a few. So here's the main entrance, and you can see, I last spoke to you 2 months ago. We've made, obviously, a lot of progress. It is in a very near finished condition, but a beautiful main entryway with that canopy and the wood grain soffit that we were able to put on that. It's a really nice look. Here's a shot looking down at the landscaping. This is the cantilever canopy. It's a little shorter. This is the parent drop-off area, but you can see the level of landscaping that we've gotten in over the recent weeks. Again, the security vestibule. Here's a shot of the intermediate library. Probably something that if you've been in Magnolia Intermediate School or Bear Branch Intermediate School or even Audubon, you'll start to see the similarities to what we consider the library or media center. It's a more of an open concept, and it's accessible from the Main Street corridors. Here's a shot of the cafeteria. A few little differences, from Magnolia Intermediate is some of the flooring and colors and the lighting that we put in here that are a little newer. Here's the gymnasium. You'll notice in this photo, we made the gymnasium longer than we did at Mag Intermediate, and then we added a curtain, and so that's what that burgundy looking item that's connected to the bottom of the bar joist, that's a curtain that will come down to essentially divide it into two gyms. So we'll have like a 5th grade gym and a 6th grade gym. We have locker rooms for the 6th graders, typical of what we've done at past intermediate schools. Here's a shot of the band hall. You can see it's basically complete. It's just we're down to touch-up items. Here's an art room. Something new that we've done at this art room at the request of Bob Medina and his staff is we added roll-down, power outlets where we could, when they're doing different projects at the tabletops, they'll be able to roll those down and have power accessibility out in the middle of the floor. It's a shot of the classroom corridor, again, in a very close to being complete condition. Typical classroom. You can see the flooring that we're using now is the LVT flooring, so it's a no wax product. And then again, getting down to the final touches on the landscaping, you can see they're doing the courtyard. In lieu of sod here, we'll just hydromulch this, and because we've got plenty of time to get grass growing. But you can see also that southern elevation and the sun exposure, and you can see where those windows have the little sunshades on them, and it does help. And this is the covered patio in the back area. So this would be a nice area for, you could take a classroom outdoors, or you could have, lunches with the parents and have outdoor seating and a couple of big fans. And then this is a shot of the event building that we're having out there. This is just a multifunctional building that'll be, be able to be used sort of in conjunction with the event center as kind of overflow, but it can also be used by, the different classes if they want to bring several classes together. And then, of course, we're targeting it to use for things like voting. So I think that's going to be a great addition to that campus. Moving on to junior high, this is the main entry. This, this will all be kind of amplified with, large canopies, again, with the wood grain soffit that we're planning for that. It's very close. When this thing takes off, it's really going to look good. Again, just a shot of the classroom wing and the sunshades that will help with the cooling. Inside, you can see where we're at. It's basically a lot of drywall finish going on right now, a lot of ceiling grid. We do have the transformer on site now, so it's just a matter of days or maybe a couple of weeks before they get all the primary lines pulled to that transformer and we get power on in this building. So this will be conditioned space within the next 2 to 3 weeks. At that point, finishes really take off. Library, again, it's just in that, where they'll go from here is they want to get the air on so that they can start painting and dropping ceiling grid and dropping ceiling tile. Because one of the things that we're doing right now is a lot of the overhead inspections to get those out of the way. Shot of the classroom corridor, it's sort of in that same condition. waiting on power. Typical classroom. There's a band hall. And you can see the volume, the space that we get there in this room, I know is a big hit with the Fine Arts Department. That's just a shot of the east side and the main entrance into the gymnasium or athletics area from the parking lot side. And then more athletics, here's a shot of the field house and concession stand area. We don't have the bleachers in yet. That's scheduled for, they're now scheduling that for the early spring. We were planning to do it before the winter, but now we're just gonna kind of wait till winter's over. Same with the turf, sort of their, you know, they want certain conditions, and it's about to get cooler, obviously, so we're probably gonna put that off to the spring as well. Also kind of helps with warranty. The CTE buildings that Dr. Campbell was referring to earlier, here's the CTE HVAC building at Magnolia West High School. You go to the interior, this is a typical classroom. This addition that we did has a total of 3 classrooms, 4 classrooms, and a lab. And here's the lab. So this is where they'll actually have air conditioning equipment set up to go out and learn how to work on. CTE Health Building has 3 classrooms and 2 labs. Here's a shot of it. Again, these 2 projects, again, are scheduled to open up in January to be open for the second semester. Interior, typical classroom. That's it. Any questions? Schedule-wise, I mean, we're in great shape, obviously, on all those projects. We feel like we're going to have the CTE buildings open for second semester. Obviously, the intermediate's well ahead of schedule. And we also are looking at probably a May, June turnover of the junior high. So we feel really good about those schedules. Probably need to maybe invite you guys out to tour the intermediate soon.
That'd be good.
Any questions? All right, thanks.
Thank you, sir. You're flying right through this. Good stuff. Okay, Ms. Rodriguez, you're next.
Good evening, Dr. Bullock and the board. I am bringing you the EB report for this past year and just kind of give you an idea of where we're at right now. This is a different clicker than I'm used to. Okay, so we have required programs for our emergent bilingual students, meaning that they have not yet mastered the English language. That's what emergent bilingual means. And we're required to have a bilingual program for grades pre-K through 6, and that's considered elementary grades according to TEA. We are operating a one-way dual language program, which means students are learning both languages simultaneously. And also, we are required to have a ESL program for all grades for students who come with a language other than English and Spanish. And we have quite a few of those languages. This is our count of emergent bilingual students across the past few years. As you can see, it's been increasing just as our total population has been. So even though it looks like we didn't grow in our EB percentage, we did in accordance to the growth of all of our population. And this is how our EB students are being served in the elementary grades in our one-way dual language program, 925 students. And where bilingual teachers are not available, usually it's our intermediate grades, and then Parkway Elementary does not have a 4th grade bilingual teacher. We have 305 students. Now, these numbers may fluctuate over the next few weeks because Frontline is working on some kinks with our coding, but Paula and the PEAMS department are keeping us up to date with those. Also, students served in ESL, 340 students currently, and not served are 57 due to parent choice. Parents have the last word as far as if they want their child to be served in a special language program or not. At secondary, we are required to have the ESL program. We have 1,172 students being served, and 72 not being served, again, due to parents denying services. And this is just a snapshot of academic progress of our emergent bilingual students. This is English and Spanish STAR reading tests. And compared to last year, I just compared my slides, and the approaches level went up overall. And then looking at secondary English 1 and 2 EOC, we definitely need to bring up the master's level, but this is, like I said, it's just a snapshot of our kids' achievement. English proficiency. So this past year, spring of 2024, was the first year that students were able to reclassify from emergent bilingual to English proficient by using the composite rating of TELPAS, meaning the listening, speaking, reading, and writing domains are lumped into one score. And so if they were advanced high and they passed their STAR reading test, they could reclassify. So in a moment, I'll show you a chart to show the comparison of how many students reclassified according to this new criteria. Right here. So last year, elementary, were able to reclassify 3 students, but this past spring, we were able to reclassify 29. And then at secondary, this year, 142 students reclassified. And we hear from our admins and teachers say, we know these kids are proficient in English. We hear them, they are mastering their STAR reading without any designated supports. And so thankfully, our exit criteria, or reclassification criteria with that composite rating allowed us to reclassify these students. So they are no longer considered as learning English. They have mastered the English. Moving on to the bilingual exception, we have to submit an application for a bilingual exception when we don't have the required bilingual teachers at those elementary grades. So one of the things that helped us out this year was the consolidation of Magnolia Elementary Zone students with Williams Elementary. And so now we're only looking at 7 teachers short, and that affects 393 students. So we come up with a plan of how do we meet their needs, their linguistic needs, so that they can master their grade level and English language skills. Also, last year, 1 teacher was put on an emergency bilingual certification permit. She was not successful in that, and I just have to report that.
Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes,
is the shortage of bilingual teachers something that's specific just to us in Magnolia ISD? Or is that something that we're seeing across
Everywhere.
the Houston area especially?
Yes, everywhere. And a few of the things that we talk about with our EB division is the certification tests. So not only do they have to become certified general education teachers with the PPR and the Science of Teaching and Reading test, they also have to take a bilingual supplemental test, a bilingual proficiency test that if I would have taken that years ago, I don't think I would have done well. And then they also have to take, I think it's those 2. So just extra tests, and they are challenging.
So not only is there a shortage of teachers who are certified in this area, it's gotten more and more difficult to become certified
Absolutely.
in this area.
Yes. Okay, so this is just a glimpse of our comprehensive professional development plan that we have to have in place because of that bilingual exception, and this is just a short list. District-wide, we have a focus on interactive language-rich opportunities in all content areas. And as of the end of last year, all bilingual campuses have been trained in the 7 steps for an interactive language-rich classroom. And our academic coordinators, all of them, have been trained in the 7 steps. Also the ELPS and sheltered instruction. We have continuous opportunities for professional development and also test prep and training for those tests I was mentioning for the bilingual certification as well as the ESL exam. And I believe that's it. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. All right, Dr. Garza, you're up next, I think.
All right, well, good evening, Mr. Blizzard, Dr. Bullock, members of the board. It's my pleasure to present our 2023-24 STAR results. We're a little delayed this year. Usually we do this in August along with our calendar results. However, for the second year in a row, there's been a lawsuit levied against TEA, and so the calendar ratings have been once again delayed. And so if you remember last year, there was a lawsuit with over 100 districts, and they were displeased with the fact that TEA kind of changed the rules of the game after the year started. This year has to do with how the tests were actually graded. So TEA this year introduced an automated scoring engine, which is kind of computer-based grading, so to speak. And that has resulted in, that definitely impacted the student grades, especially on the essay portion. And so there is, I think the last result was 5 to 10 districts have filed a lawsuit, and so there was a restraining order put in place, and now we're looking at a court date for February. So we are probably looking at another year of not knowing officially where we're at, unfortunately.
So, Dr. Garza, with the court case, we can see the results and how kids did on the test. We just don't know what label the state would put on that at this point, correct?
Officially, yes, correct. And nor can we look at how other districts are doing. We have no idea how Conroe or anyone else is doing. All we have officially that's available to see is just state STAR data.
Thank you.
So just on the test itself, so a couple years ago, this is year 2 of what TEA calls a STAR redesign. So previously, before 2 years ago, all of our assessments were usually the normal A, B, C, D multiple choice, and there was a writing component on the English 1 and English 2. However, they changed that this past year, or 2 years ago. Now we're in year 3, where there's a writing component on grades 3 through English 2 for the reading in English. No test can have more than 75% multiple choice questions. And there's cross-curricular packages on all the STAR tests. So what kids have to know in science helps in English and vice versa. For this past year, what the state did is they changed the cut scores in 7 of the 20 tests that the state gives. So what that means is what was passing for approaches meet to masters in 22-23, kids had to actually achieve a higher level for 23-24. Obviously that impacts scores as well. And then, in my opinion, what was probably one of the biggest things was the testing days were moved up significantly. So typically, in a normal school year, we took the majority of our STAR tests in May. We took English tests and reading tests usually in April to late April, and then science, social studies, and math were all in May. They moved all that up to mid-April or earlier. And so what that caused on our end is we had to revise all of our scope and sequences to lose up a month of instruction. So when you're a teacher and you lose 20 days of instruction to get kids ready for a STAR test, that matters. And so we saw that, definitely saw that with the results across the state.
And with the cut scores going up, then you got to get more questions right to
Correct.
achieve the same standard you did on the previous test, right?
In a shorter
Previous
amount of
year's
time.
test.
Correct.
In a shorter amount of time.
Correct, yes, sir.
So it's perfectly fair.
Yeah, very challenging. So just a STAR summary. Our scores were consistent with the state, meaning that where the state took losses, we usually took losses. Where we gained, the state usually gained. But across the board, I haven't seen district anywhere, and I looked at quite a few now that make gains last year. Everybody took a loss to some degree. It's just how big was your loss, all right? So you see that bottom table just shows if you put all of our approaches, let me back up. If you put all of our tests in one big pot, and you take approaches for, reading, math, science, social studies, all in one big pot, our approaches score dropped 1 point. The state dropped 1 point. You see our meet stayed the same, where the state went down 1 point. Our masters went down 1 point, where the state stayed the same. So really, it's just kind of a big stagnant year for the state in general. Any questions on that? So the next 4 slides, I'll have the same template, and I'm trying to break down as much information for you as I can on these. But I wanted to show y'all kind of where we are. So if you look at third grade reading, you'll see that 75. That means 75% of our kids were approaches last year. That was an 8-point drop from the previous year. And then you see the state was a 74, and that was a 2-point drop from the previous year for the state. But all that washes up, but we're still a point ahead of the state. So you can see across the board that elementary as a whole took drops in every tested area, and that was consistent everywhere. But you see that in our green that we are up on the state in every test area, and in most cases at a pretty significant clip. Particularly in fourth grade math, we are up double digits in all three areas. If you go back 5 years ago, we were below the state in almost every single area on this chart. So big gains by the elementary. Obviously, you don't want to take losses, but when you're taking less losses in the state, that's obviously somewhat of a positive. Any questions on that? Okay, flipping over to intermediate. So intermediate students, they take a reading and math test in 5th and 6th grade, and they also take a 5th grade science test. And so in 22-23, we saw a pretty significant gain in math and science. But a lot of times when that happens, particularly in science this past year, the state will kind of do a market correction, so to speak. And so that's why you see in 5th grade science, the state went down significantly across the board. Our approaches didn't drop as much as the state in science, but our meets and masters definitely felt that. And so science was one of the areas that got hit pretty hard by that accelerated testing schedule, where they lost a month of instruction. So that really hurt. You see, once again, though, that we are, with the exception of the master's level in 5th grade reading, we are above the state in every area. And in that area, we're actually tied with them. So overall, very pleased with how that looks in comparison to the state. Pretty comfortable leads in most categories. Okay. Flipping over to junior high. So junior high students take math and reading in 7th and 8th grade, and then they take social studies and science also in 8th grade. So 8th grade actually is our most tested grade level that we have. They actually take 4 tests. That's the most in our entire system. So you'll see there's one area that's in that 8th grade math that's where we are below the state. And so let me kind of explain that. So in junior high, our 7th grade, our advanced math students in 7th grade finish 7th grade math and finish 8th grade math. So districts have the option to give them a 7th grade STAR test or the 8th grade STAR test. Magnolia has done since ever, I think. 13 years, Susie? Yes. We've always given the 7th grade math test. So what that happens is when you have all your advanced kids take a certain grade level test, those scores go way up, clearly, right? So you'll see in 7th grade math, we have a very comfortable lead over the state, plus 11, plus 13, plus 3 across the board. But when you do that, then your 8th grade scores take a little bit of a dive, and that's what usually happens. So you'll see in 8th grade math, we're actually above the state in approaches tied to meets, but we're down in masters. That's because all those advanced math students are not in that mix, because the advanced math students in 8th grade are taking Algebra 1. Does that make sense? So there's different ways to slice the onion. Conroe ISD does it the inverse. Their kids take 8th grade STAR tests, so their 8th grade scores are very high, but their 7th grade scores across the board are below the state. So you're gonna take a hit somewhere usually, because all those advanced math students are in one pot and not both. Any questions on that? And then high school. High school had some nice gains last year, particularly in English. Real nice. We were very, very pleased with how English 2 looked, with going up a couple of points in meets and masters. You don't see big gains in English 1 and English 2 at high school level. That's usually minimal gains at most. We have one area below the state, which is in Algebra 1. But other than that, we have pretty comfortable leads across the board when it comes to all of our tested areas. So we're looking pretty good there as well. So as kind of a summary, there are 20 tested areas that the state does in grades 3 through U.S. history, all right? And so you see that bottom one. We are above the state total points, all the pluses and minuses and so forth and so on. We are above the state in 19 of 20 areas. And that one area is 8th grade math, because of the advanced math students not being in the mix. And that's been that case for the last 3 years. But if you go back to 2018, 2019, which is pre-COVID, right, we were only above the state in 14 areas. So you see we've made some nice progress the last 5 years, and we're almost to that point where we'll be 20 for 20 hopefully this year. And then finally, just this last one. So this is what we know about some of our neighbors. So you'll see that, I just picked, the bid districts that kind of border us and see, you'll see everyone took a loss to some degree. Tomball took the least, and then there was us, but you'll see, our friends, Conroe, Montgomery, Cy-Fair, Waller, so forth, took some pretty heavy losses this past year. And you can see it's kind of broken down by test, how much they lost, so to speak. And I also include on the slide, just to kind of give you an idea about our teaching force, is that we're rapidly approaching about half our teachers being with less than 5 years experience total. And a few years ago, that was not the case. Our average teacher experience has dropped to 9.2. About 3 years ago, that was 11.2. So what's happening is that teachers, we're losing seasoned teachers. Now, Dr. Bull could tell you, I mean, that when you lose people that know a lot about instruction and have learned the content, that's critical when you lose those folks. And then you're replacing them with people that are, trying just as hard, but they don't have that experience just quite yet. And so we're trying to see that a little bit in some of our results. But overall, I mean, you don't really want to, obviously taking losses is not fun, but when you see how everyone else did around us, it's kind of, comparable, obviously, and we actually fared much better than some of our peers. So hopefully we'll have some, accountability data at some point this year to kind of see where are we. If unofficially we're a solid B, but we can't go out and say that until actually the results come in. But we're very comfortable that we will be a solid B when it all comes out. So, any questions? Wow, I knew that one. Okay. So next month, Ms. Wood will give her presentation about advanced academics, and she will go over all the AP, IB results, SAT, ACT, national merit, so forth and so on. So you get a better idea about how we're doing as a total. Just right now, it's not available yet for this month. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Some great improvements recently. I know it's kind of a weird deal to have to compare against last year, but wow, what a mess.
Without a doubt.
Okay, let's see. Moving on to our consent agenda. This portion of the agenda consists of items to be routine and will be enacted by one motion unless separate discussion is requested. So is there separate discussion requested on any of the consent agenda items? Everybody good? All right, we need a motion to approve this. Motion by Sonia, seconded by Dasha. All in favor? All right, that motion passes. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hebert, you're next.
Well, good evening, members of the board. My name is Daniel Hebert. I'm a managing director with Crow. We have been engaged by the district to perform an efficiency audit related to the tax ratification election that the district has on the ballot this November. So I'm going to kind of explain briefly our process and approach to this efficiency audit and then kind of take you through some key points from our report. So in general, again, that efficiency audit is required when you are going through this TRE process. The Texas legislature established or tasked the Legislative Budget Board, LBB for short, to create guidelines that establish what this efficiency audit was to cover and the type of information that was to be presented back in 2019. And the general purpose of this from the Legislative Budget Board was ultimately to provide information to voters on sort of where the district stands in regards to the utilization of its resources. What's really important here is that the template and information that's presented in this report is straight from the state. We have no liberty to decide what information to include or exclude from this report. They simply tell you, here's the 20 different things that we want you to include. Here's the process by which we want you to include it, and then we need you to put the report together and present it, right? So everything that you're seeing presented in front of you tonight will look very similar, if not exactly the same, to other districts who have gone through this process. The other important thing here when talking about data is all of the data itself came specifically from TEA. With the exception of a couple of questions and answers in the back of this report, all of the data that we're going to be showing you is straight from TEA, right, through their PEIM submission, public information, things of that nature. So there wasn't any of this data that was specifically acquired by us in any specific way. We would have gotten this straight from a website, which is publicly available for anyone to search. So in general, when Doing a performance audit, our goal is first to define what is our objective. Again, this objective was set straight down to us by the Legislative Budget Board, and that was to assess the district's fiscal management, efficiency, and utilization of resources, and determine whether the district has implemented best practices utilized by Texas school districts. A couple of sticking points here. There is generally no official prescribed list of best practices by the state of Texas and which school districts can use, which, if you know anything about auditors, we love checklists. So to not have a checklist to be able to go and kind of follow along is difficult. But generally, it seems that the context of this audit was to evaluate this efficiency in context to a peer group of districts and the state, and look at, based on those numbers, is the district able to perform with the resources it has? We'll get to a slide in a couple of slides that talks about the first rating of the district, right, and your general first score. For 2023, that score, I think, was a 98, and your peer district sat at about a 95. So I think we're comfortable to say that based on that score, the district is efficiently utilizing its resources and the fact that you can keep up with your peer groups, right? The other thing that we wanted to do as part of the design of this audit was look at any of these data points that may be significantly different between you, your peer groups, and the state. What we generally defined as significantly different is if your peer group and the state were within larger than about plus or minus 5% of a variance in any given presented figure, we would generally consider the Magnolia ISD being outside of that range to be something that is a significant variance, or just really we want to present more information on. Again, I want to emphasize it's not our goal to issue you an opinion or anything like that on whether or not the tax ratification election is a good thing or a bad thing. It's not our goal to present to you whether any of the data in this report is a good thing or a bad thing. It's simply presenting data, outlining for you anything that is of significant difference, and kind of explaining why that difference may exist. As I go through these, I'm happy to take any questions along the way. It can be a lot of numbers, so if you want to stop and ask questions, please feel free. So generally, our audit approach, first we needed to select a peer group. Again, the Legislative Budget Board guidelines specifically tell us how to do that. There's two different approaches we can use. You want to select a group of peer group districts between 5 and 10. In the case of Magnolia ISD, we landed on 8. Again, you're going to gather data for Magnolia ISD, all of its peers and state averages, compare and present those in comparative format for all of the different tables that are in the back of this report. Again, we'll review those results, ensure that any significant variances are explained, and then prepare our report for you all. So in general, what I think was sort of one of the most important aspects of this project was selecting that peer group and sort of what we're using for comparison. My mom always used to tell me that comparison was the thief of joy, but unfortunately, that's exactly what this process is. And so what we wanted to do was really find that group of peer districts that represented a close, approximation of what Magnolia ISD is. There are two different tools we could use to do this. We decided to use the TEA Snapshot tool. Within that tool, you can kind of go in online, you could go and play with this yourself. There are different characteristics that you can use to sort of generate what peer group districts might be based on these certain sets of characteristics. In the case of our efficiency audit, we used two characteristics: the student count between 10,000 and 25,000, and the tax rate 1.2 to 1.3 dollars. Again, that tax rate is inclusive of both M&O and INS, just something important to note. Using those characteristics, we generated a list of about 30 school districts, and then kind of pared that list down to sort of a couple here that were close, maybe geographically, a couple of those that really nailed in on those characteristics and were pretty close to the district, and developed this list of about 8 peer districts. And I'm sure that you've seen some of these before. Here, I'll just point out some general demographic information. Again, you've probably seen something similar. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, but I do want to sort of caveat, is all of this information is for fiscal year 2023 and prior. Again, FY24, by the time we had started this project, number one, the district hadn't finished closing out its books yet, so district data wasn't available, and the state obviously has not gotten all of their submissions from school districts for FY24 yet. So again, we're using data here for FY23. First and foremost, our sort of first significant area that we found, kind of realized it was a pretty big discrepancy, was in revenue per student. I know that this table can be kind of difficult to see. There should be a copy of this in your board packet too. I don't have a specific page number to reference, but between Magnolia ISD and its peer district group and state average, you came below both in your total revenue. A couple of things I want to point out here. This includes local M&O taxes, state aid, federal aid, and some other miscellaneous local and intermediate sources. The local M&O tax, when we say retain, that's basically a reduction of any of these districts in your peer group or state average that had to submit money back for recapture payments. All of that is taken out of consideration here. The other thing is that this is all presented, and all the numbers that we talk about from here on forward will be presented on a per-student basis, right? This kind of gives us the best way to look at this in a comparative way. As you can see, again, that trend of sort of being below that revenue per student benchmark happened in FY23, but also we took a kind of a 5-year average of Magnolia ISD, your peer group, and that state average, and again, kind of came below both your peer group and state average in that as well. The other thing I want to point out here, when kind of looking at this in totality, Magnolia ISD relies a lot on its local M&O tax in comparison to your peer district and state averages, right? So if you look at your local M&O tax revenue per student, you're making more money per student via that tax revenue than both your peer group and the state. In comparison to that, your state aid is lower, right, than both your peer and state group. So again, just some key points of information to look at there. Question?
In fact, I was going to ask you about that. 34% of the state average comes from the state, and 20% of ours comes from the state. What would you, why the stark difference would you surmise?
So, in general, I think there's probably a bevy of factors that could happen. When you're looking at comparison to state, you have to remember there is a lot of districts out there that are receiving additional aid that don't make hardly any money in property taxes, right? Especially a lot of these rural districts, they have to send so much money back to the state because based on their ADA calculations and things of that nature, they don't end up with many property tax dollars at all. And so the state has to come in and make up that gap. But when you live in an area with a large taxing base, again, what ends up happening is you start to generate more and more of that M&O tax, and the state burden becomes a little bit less. So comparison to state here, it's difficult to kind of compare, in my opinion at least, apples to oranges in that regard. I think your peer district group is probably a little bit more of a synopsis of where you stand, right? But even then, still, that peer district group is making less overall in M&O tax and more in state aid. All right, we'll keep on keeping on. Next is expenditures per student. Again, I wouldn't call this any area of significant variance that we noted, but just something key to point out here. Again, you spend less than the peer group and state average overall, slightly less. But a couple of things that I want to point out. Number one, your instructional expense, right? Expense directly related to instruction for students is higher than both your peer group and state average. The other thing that I noted here was transportation expense, actually. It's, again, a small piece of that number, but MISD spends almost 50% more than both your peer group and state average on transportation expenses. Overall, that pattern, again, follows in that 5-year average. You spend about $110 less than your peer group and almost $1,000 less than state average on your students. The other thing that is important here, specifically for FY23 data, you had more operating expenditures per student than you had revenue per student, right? So in those cases, that forces the district to then look to make up that gap in other ways. That overall shortfall was about $515 per student in FY23, had that note as well. The last item I want to talk about here is payroll expenses and teacher turnover. So this is sort of the other significant variance that we noted was your turnover rate. Magnolia ISD had about 2%, a little bit less than 2% more turnover than peer district, your peer group, and obviously that peer group and state average turnover rate are pretty closely aligned with each other. A couple of things to point out. The highest turnover rate in that peer group was Bastrop ISD with about 26.1%, and the lowest in that peer district group was Pearland ISD with about 17%. The only reason I point that out is it kind of gives you how wide of a range this average is based off of. When looking at payroll itself, your average teacher salary actually came in slightly above your peer group, slightly below state average. However, I do think it is important to note that in that peer group average, you have districts like Tomball ISD sitting at about $65,000 for a starting teacher, and you have some College Station ISD at about $53,000. So again, quite a wide range when looking at that average. The important part here, though, I think, is that you may have a higher average teacher salary than your peer group, but you also expend more as a percentage of all your funds on payroll than either your peer group or the state, right? What that generally indicates, and the next slide kind of will show this as well, at the very bottom, we talk about students per teaching staff. Again, you're sitting below your peer group there, which means your student-to-teacher ratio is a little bit less than your peer group. And at the top line, we have a percentage of total staff that is that teaching staff. Again, you sit above both your peer group and the state. So as a percentage of overall staff that are employed by the district, your teaching staff is higher than both that peer group and state average. Generally, that is all that I have. There's a lot more in this report. Feel free to peruse and send any questions that you might have. I'd be happy to answer them. If anybody has anything you want to discuss now, I'd be happy to take it as well.
I'm curious, it's quite a disparity in district size. Was there any rhyme or reason that you would pick bigger school districts? I mean, obviously you picked Tomball and Pearland, which I imagine are kind of on the bigger side of those districts, as opposed to districts that are really spot on in student population with us within, a tolerance of 15 or 20%. I mean, so that's like 50%, 60% greater size school district.
Right, so while the district size itself, I can understand that being a sticking point, because ultimately the data in this report is broken down on a per student basis, there is some of that, I'll just call it a larger district bias, because that's what we generally see, that falls out there, because you're really truly looking at that on a per student basis. The other thing too is looking at that peer group. When you select this through the tool, I mean, that range itself is pretty wide, right? 10,000 to almost 25,000 students. I think you sit just slightly under the midpoint of that. So while some of the districts on there do fit maybe a larger student population or a smaller student population, to pick any districts that are widely smaller or widely larger, I don't know that it's going to distort your overall data that much. The factor that we added in sort of the second layer of that tax rate to really represent where you stand as far as tax collections go, I think sort of mitigates that discrepancy in student count.
Thanks.
Well, so, and I asked you a minute ago about comparing to state. I probably should have chosen the peer districts in that discussion we just had, because the peer districts are the ones that were chosen to compare us with, and it looks like Texas pays 26% of their expenses and pays 20% of ours, right? So, and so here we sit, we're pulling in less revenue, we're spending it more wisely, if I can draw some conclusions here, and according to Dr. Garza's report, we're doing quite well. How does that get communicated? Because the very first thing you said in the first slide is this is intended for the public to consume to understand whether to vote for this TRE or not. So I would think some qualitative conclusions would be helpful, and I don't know how this gets distributed either, so they can draw the conclusions that we draw when we listen to you and draw what we draw from it, right? So how can this be communicated more broadly, I guess is a question.
As far as communication goes, I mean, this report is in the hands of the district. However you wish to distribute it, that is completely up to you. When it comes to qualitative conclusions, as I sort of preface at the beginning, I have to be careful here, because I was not engaged to give you qualitative conclusions. However, I think that you can take specific points from that data, and reaching those conclusions is ultimately the goal, right? Our goal was not to tell the voter whether or not this was a good thing or a bad thing or what they should do or shouldn't do. It was really just to present the data, and you can draw your conclusions from that and what that means. I think on one hand, like you mentioned, the district is performing well and efficiently utilizing its resources if you're able to maintain scores like that with the numbers that we put in front of you. But at the same hand, is there more that you want there? And I think that's a question for the district.
Right.
Mr. Hebert, I had a question just on the comparison group specifically as it relates to teacher salary. the report says that we are paying slightly above the average of our peer group for teachers, but I notice a couple of these districts aren't in major metropolitan areas and are really dealing with an entirely different marketplace. So like, I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm fairly familiar with Central Texas and East Texas, Waco and Tyler, for instance, or, even Bastrop, would pull the average of that group down pretty significantly, and they do not deal with any of the economic competition for teaching staff that we do, being here in a large metropolitan area.
Right, so I think the sort of bullet points that I stuck at the bottom of the slide speak to that. I would almost call College Station ISD a geographic relative. I mean, we are somewhat close, but you can obviously tell the discrepancy in where you have to sit to remain competitive in your market versus where they have to sit, right? And so even that peer district average for average teacher salary is based on a pay scale that's a little bit more than $10,000, almost $11,000 apart, right? So there's quite a disparity that you can fit, or any given district can fit in that group average.
So maybe a logical conclusion to look at where we line up against maybe the kind of districts that compete in a similar economic environment than we do.
For sure. And in our report, like I mentioned, one of the explanations that we were given by the district and kind of looked into as a reason for that turnover rate was looking at those geographic comparative districts, Conroe ISD and Tomball ISD specifically, and sort of where your beginning pay scale sat in relation to those, and it was lower.
I would think Pearland and Grapevine Colleyville probably in the Metroplex would fall under similar conditions. Okay. Thank you.
So given the purpose of this is obviously to inform the public before our TRE, how many would you, maybe you know this, how many of these reports are how many districts are doing this?
It has become increasingly popular. I think many districts are finding themselves in the situation where they need to balance their budgets, frankly. And I would say, I think the first wave of these that we really saw start was 2018, 2019 timeframe, and that was sort of when these initial guidelines first came into place. And then really probably in the last 2 years here, I know our firm was contacted by 4 or 5 districts at the beginning of April, May to perform these audits, which only indicates to me that they'd be going through the same process.
So the slide where you do the comparison between the districts, the stark discrepancy to me is where we're at like 19% of state funding, and yeah, this one, where our percentage of our total is 19.6, and the state average is 33.6, and our peer average is 25. To me, those numbers are just grossly out of whack. So it would seem to be that the only way we can catch up on those numbers is to go to our voters and get an increase in our tax rate where the state's going to contribute equally in that. Is that, do you guys have any understanding of how that works? Is that the only, and like, how do we catch up, I guess is the question there.
So I'll caveat my response slightly. I don't want to tell you or your voters what they should do.
Fair.
What I will say is the Texas school funding formula is an extraordinarily difficult thing to understand, as I'm sure Dr. Morris has tried many years. I'm still working on it. In general, it would be difficult without some extraordinary school funding reform or something like that to catch up in that number without also pulling in some extra money at home. Generally, that state funding formula relies on you bringing in those dollars from home and sort of the state matching that, right? Which I think at the beginning of our report and sort of the district's overall plan was, if we raise money from this TRE, the state comes in with a sort of matching on top of that, that ultimately gives us that boost. Again, when you're talking about this comparison, it might be, your state number is going to go up, sure, but so is your local M&O number, right? So we may still be lagging behind in a comparison between your peer and state average as far as that state funding per student, or that percentage at least. But overall, you'd be recouping some of that cost, and then again, looking towards that expenditure per student, getting a lot closer to making that number balanced.
Thanks.
It's interesting to see the gap that wide when the tax gap that you chose, two criteria, 10,000 to 25,000, the tax gap was $1.21, $1.32, whatever it was. It's interesting to see that dynamic going on. Something's contradictory here, I don't know.
And, you know, through other of these type of audits that we've looked at and that we performed, there's a lot of things that jump out, and you can kind of take a single piece of this data and sort of really sit on that and say, man, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There are a myriad of reasons why that could be the case. The thing that I think is important to take from this is to look at this data in its totality and sort of what does it say altogether, right? And so that's what we tried to do, was kind of piece some of this together for you, and not just looking at, you know, specific revenue sources, but your revenue per student in comparison to your expenditures, what your payroll looks like as a percentage of your overall expenses, things of that nature. But I agree with you.
All right, we good? Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
All right, Dr. Morris?
Can I talk about the state aid thing real quick? Can we?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
Yes, please.
all right. So, you know, we've been doing these Vader presentations, right? So we talk about the basic allotment, where every school district in the state of Texas receives the same amount of overall funding when you add in your M&O tax revenue plus your state aid, right? Well, all districts are the same across the state of Texas. So the difference as it relates to the basic allotment component is how high our tax base is. The higher your tax base, the more that you rely on local revenue to meet the total basic allotment, okay? So that's one of the reasons why we're lower than everyone else percentage-wise from a state aid component. Does that make sense? And then the other component of that, we talk about this, is the weighted funding that districts receive, okay? So you have your basic allotment, which we're going to be lower in state aid because of our property values that we have versus most districts, which basically is your property value divided by your weighted average daily attendance, okay? But then you have your student makeup. Well, our student makeup is different than state average and even peer average in this group. You saw what our economically disadvantaged numbers were versus our peer group. We were at 47%. Peer average was at 56%. State average is closer to 65%. So in addition to the basic allotment being compressed, we don't receive a lot of those extra monies that a lot of districts do because of their student makeup. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. All right. Sorry, I'll move to the next one. I just was chomping at the bit to talk about it too. Yeah.
Part of the confusion, I think, is we don't have a heavy industry here. I mean, it's not like I draw the distinction he made about the state, you know, different districts have different makeup and property values and corporations and all that. We're not heavy in that way. We may be high property
We are
values.
not, but again, you sort of have to draw a line. Basic allotment, we're receiving the same amount of money per student. We're just receiving much less state aid because of our property value wealth. And then you add in the disparity of the weighted programs versus the average district in the state of Texas, and it compresses us even more because we just don't receive as much money because we're not serving the number of kids in those special areas that the average district is in the state of Texas. So that makes sense.
Yep.
It doesn't change the numbers. I mean, it's still ugly. Yeah, I mean, 20%, it's not good. But anyhow, sorry, I'll carry on to the next item.
Thank you.
So I know the board is very aware of this topic, you know, the history, but I'll just give a brief summary. Back in 2018, the city of Magnolia created a new water rate user category and placed nonprofits in that category, including Magnolia ISD, which at the end of the day meant that we were paying higher water rates than all other users, approximately 50% higher. Since that time, we've had off and on differing approaches to try to resolve the issue. And finally, happy to announce that the city of Magnolia has finally agreed to the settlement terms that we brought before them, which basically is to treat Magnolia ISD like all other commercial users. So we will be removed from the Magnolia ISD only category and be placed in the commercial rate category from here forward. We also included language in the settlement agreement to protect the district so that we will not be treated differently in the future as well. And that's the short, guys. I do want to thank publicly Mayor Dancer for his efforts in a relatively short period of time serving as mayor to help us get this across the finish line. Because like I said, we've gone through different avenues. We've presented to the legislative board back in 2019 and 2021, and we're finally bringing this to a conclusion. So be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, if there's no questions or comments, we need a motion that we approve the settlement agreement with the City of Magnolia regarding cause number 23-03-04135, Magnolia Independent School District versus the City of Magnolia, pending in the 457th District Court, Montgomery County, Texas. Motion by Jordan, seconded by Stacia. All in favor? All right. Motion. All opposed? Yep. All right. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. King, you're up next.
All right, well, good evening, Mr. Blizzard, Dr. Bullock, members of the board. So I was here last month and gave you an overview of the process that we started to take a look at our intermediate and junior high boundaries. And so I won't bury the lead. I'm here this evening. I'll present a little further on where we're at, but also ask for your approval for our new boundaries that you'll see here in our last slide. So a lot of this you'll see very similar to what I presented in September, but I just wanted a refresher and make sure everybody understands sort of the process we went through in order to get to where we are today. So again, the same in September. August was important for us as far as the boundary process goes, particularly in the use of the thought exchange with Ms. Myers and her crew to get input from our community about what they think we should consider when constructing new boundaries and what their thoughts are. And we also had an open house at Magnolia High School just for a sort of in-person question and answer session for the community. And so lots of good input from those. Just a reminder of what our guiding principles are. I mean, essentially there in the bold, you can see we wanted to be efficient with our use of facilities. We don't want to have overcrowded campuses, obviously. And we want to balance enrollment. And we want to be able to plan for future growth, but we also want to be responsive to the input that we get from our parents and our community at large. So you can see several different factors we take into consideration in coming up with the boundaries. Again, input from parents, capacity of campuses. You'll see down there at the bottom with transportation patterns. That's something we have to look at when you're drawing new boundaries. And we really do, while we know that it is going to cause a change in some of the routines with families, we try to minimize that impact on them. Again, familiar slide, nothing's changed. I expect we will get some fresh data from demographers at the end of this month with our snapshot. So this is the data we still have, and you can see there, if you look at that where it says new fifth and sixth grade center, and you kind of go all the way across, you can see what the demographers project for that campus, and you can see that we don't near capacity there until 2031, 2032. If you go down to the bottom with a new junior high, you can see that we are projected to hit capacity there in 2031, but will be pretty close as we enter into the 28-29 school year and the 29-30 school year. So it's just a lot of growth there in the central part of our district. So it's a good thing we have a school there for all those students. These are just, again, some of the questions we asked on the thought exchange. I won't belabor these points, but we did want to go out and ask our community about what they thought about the boundaries, what they think we should take into consideration. We had a lot of a really good input there and a lot of participants, as you can see, over 1,200. And they can go in and share their thoughts, but also rate those thoughts. So you can see overall we had 17,000 ratings. So again, lots of conversation there. These are just some of the high points. Obviously, proximity, making sure that we have schools that are close to where our families live is important. Sort of an obvious thing, but important nonetheless. So those are some of the themes that came from that first thought exchange. Second, towards the end of August, where we had actually put out a proposed map that you guys saw in September. We asked what their thoughts were on the proposed boundaries. The input really didn't change at that point. You can see we still had over 1,200 participants, about 14,000 ratings, 600 thoughts. Really a lot of the same input we got out of that thought exchange, which in a way it's good. We're capturing what the community wants. So again, it makes sense to change boundaries for kids closer to the new junior high. So proximity is important to our community as far as building new schools and creating boundaries there. So we did ask parents and community members about transfers, mostly parents obviously in this category. So about 11% said that they would seek a transfer, and in this case, transfer is sort of misleading. It would be more of a grandfather. So those kids' parents would say, "Hey, I would like to stay at MIS," or "I want to stay at BBI," so on and so forth. So it's technically a transfer, but they would really be asking to stay at their home campus. We had about 11% say that that's something that they would want. And then, of course, you can see the folks who said that they would not want to seek a transfer and the unsure. So we'll see how that goes. This is new from last month, but old from the last time we talked about boundaries last year when we redrew boundaries for Audubon Elementary. But we will have a transfer process like we do every year. Regardless of whether we draw boundaries or not, we always have the opportunity for parents to put in for intra-district transfers. Those requests will open October 21st if our new boundaries are approved. And then they will close November 1st. And one of the reasons why we have a much quicker turnaround on our intra-district transfers for boundaries and for grandfathering is because we have to have some certainty on the number of students we're going to have in those new campuses so we can staff them. So I realize that is a very quick turnaround, but I also feel like we've given lots of advance notice to parents about new boundaries and where the schools are going to be, and our thoughts are 2 weeks to sort of finally make the decision as to whether or not you want to request that transfer is a good amount of time, but it also puts us in a position where we can look at those transfers, decide to grant or deny them, and then so starting November 1st, we will have a really good idea of how many students we're going to have in each of those campuses so we can begin staffing them appropriately and being efficient in that manner. And again, the rest of this is just where they'll go. There will be a school boundaries page. They can go in and select the reason that they want to transfer, or in this case, to stay in their home campus. Again, we do not provide transportation to students who are on a transfer of any kind. And they're only valid for one school year. So that's something that we would revisit and ask them to reapply every school year, just like we do for every other transfer in our district. Since that's new, any questions about transfer process? So here's our current intermediate and junior high zone. And I'll point you down to the right-hand side of your slides there where it says current enrollments. So you can see where we sit there with BBI at a little over 1,000, BBJH over 1,100, same for MIS and MJH. So, and that's of September 6th of this year. And then you can see our revised proposed zone. So we did have some input from parents that we tinkered a little bit with this new map. It is a little bit different from the one you saw in September. That was mostly just, again, to stay within our guiding principles to balance enrollment and make sure that we didn't have some campuses that were much larger than another. And so you can see down there in sort of the middle of the slide there, it talks about the proposed enrollment. So BBI, right around 700, BBJ about 750. Parkway Intermediate and Parkway Junior High, both sitting there about between 670 and 660 students. And then our far west side with Magnolia Intermediate, Magnolia Junior High, both sitting around 840 students. So we feel that's pretty balanced as far as enrollment goes. We're happy with those numbers. And I'll get here and we can go back to this slide, but if these boundaries are approved, our communication plan would be to send a district newsletter out with the information about upcoming transfer window, of course, and then email, call, text, and also send hard copy letters out to parents who will be impacted by the zone, just giving them information about what this means, again, talking to them about the transfer process, so on and so forth, making sure that there's no surprises, because while we've put stuff on the website and we've done our best to communicate, we want to make sure that we have reached out and that there are no surprises come next August when it's time to go to the new school and we don't have parents saying, I had no idea. We don't want that to happen, obviously. So we want to communicate the best way we can. So that's the plan, obviously, if the boundaries are approved. So I'll go back to this slide. Here's our proposed intermediate and junior high zones for the 2025-2026 school year. Happy to take any questions, but goal here tonight is to ask for you to approve these. Questions?
I don't have any major questions. However, I just think the lines look really clean, and so I appreciate that. I think that's a good thing. And then also, I just wanted to thank you and the entire team. I know Denise, too, with just the really good work and listening to our community. So thank you.
What else?
Yeah, I appreciate you doing it, Dr. King, because, you know, there's a lot of communities that just put this together and say, here it is, and roll it out. It's administered a little different. So thank you.
Well, we value the input from our parents and our community, but it is something like we met several times sort of as a committee where we look at how this impacts curriculum instruction, how it impacts transportation, where we at with HR, special services. So it really is a group effort in coming up with this final product. So.
Can I double dip?
Sure.
I was just going to say, with the great communication and everything you've done thus far, I think I have had several parents reach out to me regarding the communication of the next steps of if I do want to stay, you know, so I value and I thank you for the very clear communication ahead, and I think that'll be really good for our community as well.
And I think that's the next step, you know, the transfer process. We'll have to consider each of those sort of on their own. But yeah, we hope that we can at least communicate clearly about next steps. What else?
Okay, if there's not any more questions or comments, we need a motion that the board approve the intermediate and junior high school boundaries as presented, effective for the 2025-26 school year. Motion by David, seconded by Jordan. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Any other loose ends?
No, sir.
Get to
On to the next one?
safety, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're winding up here, but as part of our constant and ongoing efforts to ensure the safety and security of our campuses, the board is going to discuss our recent security audit. Due to the sensitive nature of this information, we're going to hold that discussion in closed session during our executive session, which is coming up to discuss this item as well as some items that we sometimes have, but tonight, consultation with attorney pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, discuss the 2024 security audit and appointment, or specific occasions for implementation of security personnel or devices pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.076 of the Texas Government Code, personnel discussion and recommendations pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.074, and finally, discussion of purchase, sale, exchange, or value of real property pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.072. So with that, thank you very much for being here, and we're going to recess at this point. Thank you. All right, we need a motion that we adjourn this meeting. Motion by Stacia, seconded by Jordan. All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.